Welcome everyone to today's session, and I'd like to begin today with acknowledging the traditional landowners, the lands that we meet on today. I'm coming to you from the Gimoy, Wallaburri, Adinji peoples in North Queensland in Cairns, and just pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'd also like to give an acknowledgement today for the voice of lived experience, and really just acknowledge the courage and the immense value that is added from people's lived experience. Everyone's lived experience is unique. Everyone's lived experience has the amazing ability to contribute to the space that we work in and help us better understand the people that we design and work with. So, welcome to Men's Health Week, and today is our fifth and final Men's Health check-in of the week. Today's event is hosted by Australia's Men's Health Forum, the peak body for people working to improve the lives of and health of men and boys. My name's Tynan, and I'm blessed today to be here stepping in for Glenn Poole. I've been lucky enough to do a variety of things for Australian Men's Health Forum over the years, and I'm delighted today to be stepping in as the chair for today's session. I have a few roles that I do around the place, but one of them is a joint venture between Australian Men's Health Forum and Roses in the Ocean, and that's the Australian Men's Lived Experience of Suicide Network. I get to co-chair that with another amazing person, and we can provide some information on that later on. But look, I'd really like to kick off today. And this week we've covered a range of topics in these lunchtime check-ins. We've been through exercise, sleep, men's health check-ins, how to help mates doing it tough. And today's talk turns to the link between alcohol, drugs, and mental health. And our speaker today is Jessica Taylor. Jessica is a psychotherapist and program supervisor at FoundoBlue, a counselling and mental health training and education program for people in the construction industry. Jessica has years of experience working with drug, alcohol, and gambling, addiction, gendered violence, sexual assault, forensic issues, grief and loss, trauma, adverse child experiences, workplace accidents and injuries, and everything in between. Jessica enjoys speaking at workplace toolboxes, industry workshops, and conducting training on the importance of mental health and suicide prevention. Welcome, Jessica. In today's session, Jessica will explore the links between substance use, mental health issues, and a particular focus on the impact on men's health. Jessica, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Tynan. I will just share my screen with you all. So I too would like to acknowledge the Wangal people of the Eora Nation, where I am sitting today, the traditional custodians of the land. And I wish to pay my respects to their elders, past and present and emerging. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. And I would also like to acknowledge the lived experience here in the room of substance use issues and mental health. So a little bit about who we are. So FoundoBlue is part of Foundation House, which is a 28-day residential rehab for people experiencing issues with alcohol, drugs, and gambling. So we're based in Sydney in the inner west, and we've been running for about 24 years now. We were founded by the construction industry for people in the construction industry because, you know, there's been a lot of people experiencing substance use issues in the industry. And we also work with other unions, so not just the CFMEU, the HSU, the PSA, the ETU, so all kind of areas of constructions, public service, health services, and things like that. And we provide support to their members as well as their family members. So in addition to the rehab, we have the FoundoBlue program. So we provide an outreach counselling service, again, for people in the unions and their family members. And we provide mental health support for people experiencing any type of psychological distress. So whether that's anxiety, depression, relationship breakdown, financial stress, any sort of life issues, People might be struggling with substance use issues and just want to reduce their use if they're not ready to come into program. So we also provide critical incident response. So if there's an accident or an incident on a work site, we will send counsellors out to provide immediate mental health support to people who are involved or witness the incident. And we also provide ongoing PTSD counselling from that. And we also provide training around drug, alcohol, and gambling, mental health issues, and suicide awareness and prevention to workers in the industry. So looking at men and substance use, mental health and suicide, because they're all quite interrelated. So according to Australia's National Drug Strategy Household Survey, men are much more likely to drink alcohol on a daily basis and consume greater volumes than women. Alcohol use disorders and suicide and self-inflicted injuries are two of the leading causes of health burden amongst young men. And amongst those aged between 25 and 44, alcohol use disorders are one of the top 3 leading causes of the total burden of disease and fatal burden. And certainly with the clients that we see are more heavily skewed towards men seeking support for their substance use issues. And so mental ill health remains high amongst Australian men, with up to 25% experiencing a diagnosed mental health disorder in their lifetime. And in a recent research project, 40% of men experienced severe depression were experiencing depression symptoms 2 years later. And only a quarter of men said they were likely or very likely to seek help from a mental health professional if they experienced an emotional or personal problem. And almost 25% said they would not seek help from anyone. And, this really speaks to, some of the barriers that men face in terms of their own help-seeking behaviour and accessing support. And loneliness, is significantly associated with experiences of depression and suicidality among Australian men, above and beyond socioeconomic disadvantage and unemployment. And then a lot of this tends to, interact with, men experiencing thoughts of suicide. So in 2022, a total of 2,455 men died by suicide, and men aged between 45 and 49 have the highest rates of those aged under 80 years and account for the largest proportion of male suicides, and 3/4 of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who died by suicide were male. So, look, it's really important to remember that when discussing statistics on drugs and alcohol, mental health, and particularly suicide, that each one of these numbers and percentages represents a person, a man just like you who lived a very full life with family, friends, and loved ones. So, when we think about the statistics, it really goes to show that there's a lot of men out there in the world who are suffering, whether it's with substance use issues, mental health, or thoughts and behaviours of suicide. So when we look at why people drink and use substances, and there's often a complex relationship between substance use and mental health issues. So we call this comorbidity or a dual diagnosis. And what that means is these two issues exist together and they impact on each other in various ways. So, for example, someone experiencing mental health issues such as depression or anxiety might use substances to alleviate their distressing symptoms. So we hear phrases like self-medicating with alcohol, for example. And I'm sure all of us know, or it might even be ourselves, know of someone who might feel really socially anxious, and you know, when they have a couple of drinks, it helps them to relax. You know, they become more social, and it increases their confidence. So on the other hand, using substances can sometimes induce mental health symptoms in individuals, such as anxiety or depression, paranoia, psychosis, things like that. So when we look at why people use substances recreationally, and it's simply because it, you know, makes people feel good. It can dull the edge of a really hard day and help people to feel better physically and emotionally, temporarily anyway. So it can enhance social interaction and give people confidence. Some people enjoy the taste and really like, you know, pairing it with foods, for example. Yet problems can arise when people lack awareness and education around their drinking and substance use habits and the physical and psychological impact it can have on one's overall health. So it can impact negatively on intimate and partner relationships. So research has shown that men tend to externalize their feelings of distress and shame, and they do that by using substances, as well as other things like aggression, displays of anger. You know, whereas compared to women tend to internalize their distress. So working in drug and alcohol, we often get asked, you know, what is the line between, you know, being a heavy drinker or someone who just likes to party, and then the line that crosses over into problematic substance use. So here is a guide called the 4Ls, and a sociologist called Roizen established this in the late 70s. And it's a really good tool that anyone can use to measure their behavioural patterns and the consequences of their actions. And there's since been 2 editions to reflect the experiences of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So, you know, we start with liver. So this represents our physical and our psychological health. So, you know, are you experiencing poor physical health symptoms? Alcohol and substances can increase someone's chronic disease. Are you having accidents or injuries while you're intoxicated or because of substance use? And how is your mental health going? You know, are you experiencing poor mental health? So, you know, things like anxiety, which a lot of people talk about. And then we have love. So this represents our family, our friends, and our partners. So are you having relationship problems? You know, is your partner saying things like, you know, can you please not drink, or, you know, use substances when we go out to see certain people or when we go out, that sort of thing. We know that alcohol and substances are a higher risk factor in domestic and family violence. Are you experiencing fractured relationship with your kids or your extended family member? So, you know, what are your kids or family members, what are they saying about your substance use, or what's the impact on them? And then social isolation. So we know that some substances lead people to withdraw from family and friends. So then we have lifestyle. So this represents our work, accommodation, education, and our recreation. So are you needing to take days off work or study because of intoxication or because you're still hungover from the night before? Are your hangovers or come downs impacting on your daily functioning? So, you know, are you missing your kids' sports, for example, because you're, you know, hungover or still intoxicated? Are you experiencing financial difficulties? And, you know, is there a loss of self-joy activities? So often people experiencing addiction issues will talk about, you know, not not engaging with the activities that they previously used to enjoy, like golf or fishing or things like that. And then we have law. So this would represent, the police, child safety, and family court. So are you experiencing, DUIs? Are you getting arrested for substance-related offences, such as public intoxication, violence offences? Is child protection involved because there's a concern about problematic substance use in the home? And is it impacting on any family court issues? And then for our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brother and sisters, we have law, which represents knowledge and traditions. So not keeping social and cultural obligations, breaking Aboriginal law while intoxicated, or not respecting or passing on or learning culture. And then land represents country and place. So have you stopped looking after, visiting or respecting country? Perhaps you don't have access to traditional lands or sacred sites due to intoxication. Or are you feeling lonely for country? So if you recognise yourself or a loved one within these criteria, it's really just an opportunity to reassess your relationship with your substance of choice. Recognising the harms that substances are causing, and how you can look at ways to reduce the impact of these negative harms on yourself and your loved ones. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what kind of supports are available out there. So when we work with individuals, whether it's around substance use or mental health or a combination of both, what can be helpful is using the biopsychosocial model of health. And this is a really holistic framework that takes into consideration all aspects of an individual and their well-being. So we look at biological factors. So, genetics, a family history of mental health disorders or substance use can increase susceptibility. Our neurotransmitters, so our imbalancing chemicals like serotonin and dopamine can affect mood and behaviour. So our brain structure as well. So any physical changes or injuries to the brain, including trauma, such as childhood trauma, and especially during those foundational years when things like temperament, attachment styles, coping mechanisms are developed, all of this can impact on mental health. And then, of course, our physical health. So our chronic illnesses, our nutrition, our sleep patterns all affect mental well-being. And then we've got our psychological factors, so our cognitive processes. So our patterns of thinking, perception, and interpretation of events can influence mental health. Our emotional regulation, so the ability to manage and respond to emotions appropriately. So what we tend to see in some men that we work with is they have issues with anger, and they often describe going from 0 to 100 really quickly in some situations and have an explosion. So, this certainly comes under the umbrella of emotional regulation. And then behavioural patterns. So habits, actions such as avoidance or resilience can also play a part in mental health. And then personality traits like optimism, self-esteem, and coping skills. And then we have our social factors. So our family dynamics, our relationship with family members and our upbringing, social support, so whether we have supportive friends, family, or a community, our socioeconomic status, so our economic stability, education and employment, and cultural influences as well. So our cultural beliefs, stigma, and our access to care. So this biopsychosocial model suggests that mental health is best understood considering the complex interplay of all three of these domains. And when we address all of these dimensions, we can really recognize that each individual's experience of mental health and also their capacity for recovery from distress, mental health, or substance use issues tends to be very unique and multifaceted. So looking at gender-specific factors that affect men. So in the cohort we work with, men in the construction industry, there's still a lot of very hyper-masculine attitudes among men who might hold traditional values on what it means to be a man and their role in the home and the broader community. So we still hear of men, talking, that they're really tough, they're just putting up and shutting up, not talking about their emotions, and not opening up when things go wrong in their lives. But as therapists, we know the effects of not talking about how you're feeling, because when you hold on to distressing emotions such as hurt, disappointment, sadness, resentment, it can build up within and come out in really unhelpful ways. And what we actually see is the effect of, when men start talking about their stuff, their feelings, their emotions, or things of what might have happened in the past, there's a really big weight off their shoulders, and we can see that physically and emotionally and socially, like the biopsychosocial model we were talking about before. But it's understandable because men are not usually taught how to talk about their stuff. And we understand why this happens because, we know that when boys grow up not being taught how to do this, how to have these conversations and why it's important, they might not have the role model at home to demonstrate how to do this. And then, of course, when they become adults, they're going to really struggle, with this aspect. And, I still see that it seems to me that a lot of men are still afraid to be different in some way. So there seems to be a high level of implicit and explicit expectations of conformity amongst men. So that stepping outside the comfort zone and then opening up and being vulnerable by talking about feelings, there's often a fear that they'll be made fun of by other men, or that they'll be ostracized by their peers for being different. And fear and shame impacts on men's help-seeking behaviour and their higher reliance on externalising their distress through anger, aggression, alcohol, or substance use issues, but leading to quite a silent epidemic of suffering for men. So with that in mind, it can really lead to a lack of meaningful social interaction and connection with others. So men will often talk about how they may have social connections, but it's not really, they don't really have meaningful conversations or connections. So we hear that, when men go out with their mates, that they often tend, to end up talking about surface level things like, the game that they saw, the players, Sydney house prices, what's going on in politics, or, stuff like that. But these kind of surface level topics don't really make way for men to talk about deeper issues, such as how someone's coping if they're experiencing distressing situations in their lives, such as a relationship breakdown or some sort of life challenge. And in addition to this, we also hear that men sometimes have difficulty gaining and maintaining social connections. So again, men will talk about having mates, but not close friends who they can talk about the bigger stuff that's going on in their lives in a meaningful way. So again, going back to talking about just those surface level topics. So, you know, what we hear is that the trajectory of men's social connection tends to be, as a young person, they have a lot of mates where they do meaningful activities. So whether that's travel, watching sport or playing sport together, they make more of an effort to socialize together. They might be working together or studying together. But, you know, they make the effort to stay in touch more closely. So either by circumstance, because they're working or studying together, or because of time. You know, they don't have much external time pressures competing for their time. And they have the energy to do so. But then at some point, people will partner up. They might have children, or they might move away for work or their relationships. And this is where we see a real decline in men's friendship and social connection. Certainly acknowledging, of course, that, you know, having a family with young children, your social time tends to go from being, you know, really quite large to quite small. But what tends to then happen in a relationship, and the clients we work with, is then the woman of the family will then do the majority of maintaining social connection for the family. So they'll be the ones organising catch up with friends of family, organising the social activities, making new friendships with people, say with the parents of their kids' friends. And meanwhile, the guy just goes along with the flow. But then what can happen if the relationship breaks down through death or divorce is men can be left feeling really socially isolated and with no social connection of their own. You know, men will say that the friends they've made in the relationship are his partner's friends. And they've neglected their own personal friendships. So, you know, the many mates that they had as a young person, they've neglected to make time and effort for those friendships. They might talk about, again, having mates at work, being able to banter, but not those close personal friendships that support someone going through a life crisis. So, then, of course, this can lead to high levels of loneliness. So we have an epidemic of loneliness going on right now, certainly highlighted by COVID and the lockdowns. And this loneliness contributes to, you know, poorer mental health, increased substance use issues, and, you know, really contributes to feeling a lack of belonging. And I think it's worth widening our lens here a bit and looking at the social changes we've experienced, you know, just in the last 10 years alone with social media and the internet, because it can really feel like now more than ever, you know, we're more connected than ever. So with social media, for example, you know, we can find our old school friends and friend them on Facebook. We might feel more connected to celebrities or more important people and have more parasocial relationships that way. And it can give us the illusion that we're connected to these people. But it really is an illusion, because being friends with someone on social media doesn't replace picking up the phone and talking to someone or meeting with someone in person, giving actual time, energy and effort. And looking at the internet and the convenience that it's now providing us to make our lives easier. So previously, we had to go out in the world, you know, to survive, to get our life admin done. And by doing that, we would get these, you know, this social support. So, for example, we would have to go into a bank to get our banking done. And by that, we would have to talk to the teller or the service person. Same thing when we would do our grocery shopping, we would talk to people. And, you know, same thing when we go to buy clothes or furniture, we would have to, like, you know, leave our homes and go out in the world and actually have interaction. And these opportunities provide micro connections that help us feel part of a broader community. But now, because of the convenience of the internet and you know, everything that we can have delivered to our home, we don't even have to leave our houses to survive. Everything that we need can be ordered online, you know, whether it's groceries, alcohol, drugs, takeaway, food, furniture. All of our banking is done online. Same thing with booking appointments. Everything is just, you know, taken away that human element. So we have an unprecedented level of convenience in our lives right now, but at what costs? Because missing out on these micro opportunities for connection and socialization really can contribute to someone feeling really lonely, isolated, and disconnected from their community. And we're social creatures. It's in our biology to connect with others, you know, to feel part of a tribe, you know, something bigger than ourselves. So, you know, the way our society is heading is to become more individualistic and more isolated, you know, can have more negative impacts on our mental health. So I guess the big question now is, you know, what can we do? What can you do to support your mental health and to future-proof any mental health issues that may arise? So, you know, we can enhance what we call protective factors. And what that means is by creating a range of supports around us, both external and internal, means that when a life crisis happens or we go through some big changes, we already have some supportive systems in place that can help us move through those big life changes with ease. And it's helpful to build an initial awareness of self. So it's just a questioning of where you are at right now in life, and anything that might not be working out for you. So, you know, how are you feeling about your life, your career, your relationships? Asking yourself, well, why do I behave in certain ways? Is it healthy? Do I want to be carrying old habits or patterns? And then, you know, how do I go about fixing or changing things in my life? So then going back to this biopsychosocial model for health, it can be a good framework for working out what areas of your life that you can strengthen and support in some way. So, you know, and I also really want to emphasize the importance of the mind-body connection. So understanding that what we do for ourselves physically can have a real positive effect on our mental health and vice versa. So I like to think of it as a giant two-way freeway that connects our minds with our bodies. So, for example, when we do physical activities, our body produces endorphins, you know, those feel-good chemicals that sometimes give us, you know, like a feeling of wellness, a really high feeling. So people talk about a runner's high, for example. So those endorphins are responsible for us feeling really good and a lot more positive in our mental health. Physical exercise can also change our body shape, often for the better, which can then lead to feelings of higher self-esteem, higher satisfaction with one's appearance and physical capability. And it can also reduce our propensity for some chronic disease and physical health issues. And then all of that leads to positive feelings about ourselves. Reducing our substance use intake can improve cognitive functioning, as well as reducing anxiety and depression symptoms. And then looking at the psychological, so, you know, looking at our personal growth through self-development, finding our purpose, connecting with our family, community, finding a meaningful connection with others, which then leads into, our stronger social connection. Certainly talking about our stuff is really good for our psychological health. And then how do we go about maintaining mood? So I often refer to this as self-joy activities. And, these are activities that bring us joy and happiness. Now, we know what that feels like in the body. So it's that feeling of when we're really looking forward to doing something or seeing someone. We get that feeling of excitement and happiness, whether in the heart or in the belly. And often these activities involve meaningful social connection. So, making effort with friends and activities which supports our physical and social health. And another reason that it's important that you do this is because, you are then a model for young men to have on how to live a well-rounded life and how to prioritize your mental health. So whether it's your own kids, your own grandkids, or young men in your family or community, by doing things that support your own mental, physical, and social health, you can become a healthy model for what the younger generation's idea of masculinity can be. By doing these self-joy activities, these are activities that help you connect with your senses and ground you in your body. So the example that I have up here, is playing golf, going fishing, riding a motorbike, or doing some art. All of that is really helpful in connecting us to the present moment, because when we're doing these activities, we actually focus on our senses. So, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're feeling with our body, what we're smelling even. And when we're doing that, what we're actually doing is mindfulness. So, people talk about, being mindful in terms of meditation and, sitting on a cushion, which is also great and wonderful for mental health support. But, mindfulness can also be going out and playing around with golf or sitting there throwing a line at it. Because when you're focused on, the present moment and what your body's doing in this present moment, we're not focused on what's going up on you, all the anxieties, the fears, the, worries about yesterday, the fears about tomorrow. So it's a really positive thing that we can do for ourselves to, pay attention to the present moment. And of course, the number one thing that you can do for your mental health is to talk to people. So whether it's your loved ones, your friends, or reaching out to support services, because when life takes a turn for the worse, which it will at some point, because no one gets through life without some sort of massive life event or 10, it can be really destabilizing. And it can take a lot of courage to reach out. But really, it's the most kindest thing that you can do for yourself, because you don't have to carry the burden of suffering alone. And the resistance to reaching out for support, so going back to those ideas about masculinity and having to be tough and do it on your own, I mean, really, that's just a barrier in your own mind. It's the barrier that men put up for themselves that really becomes quite a significant barrier for getting support. But we find that, when you jump over that hurdle, and reach out, connect with others, whether it's, reaching out for psychological support from a therapist, for example, you'll find that, life really does become a lot easier, less lonely, less isolating, and more joyful. So here are a range of support services, some of them specifically for men, such as Men's Line, Samson, Dads in Distress, for example. But all of these, for whatever issue you might be struggling with, there is a support service out there that can, support you with that. And I'm happy to share this with people if they would like. But I would also like to highlight a really wonderful initiative for men that I've learned about recently. So it's called the Men's Table. And the idea is that men in a particular geographical community can meet once per month for connection and real talk, meaning talking beyond the banter. So it's really encouraging men to open up and talk about their lives, their struggles, things might be going well for them or things like that. And the idea is to build a community of men based on more meaningful connection. And this is just one initiative among many that's out there in Australia right now. I guess, Men's Shed is also another one. So look, please check them out and also find what's available in your community. And there's a lot of things out there, and you've really just got to be really proactive in finding out what's available. So here's a list of references that I have used. If anyone is interested, I'm also happy to share this for people. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. That was really insightful, and I love the overview, like the journey around framing it up the statistics wise, because sometimes the statistics really point out how prevalent the problem actually is and how common it is. I really love the insight too into connecting with things and the relationships and the link between loneliness. And I know you've just mentioned Men's Table and on the link, but there's some variety of other ones around, like mentoring men, Real Mates Talk, book clubs. Australian Men's Health Forum has information around a big list of support groups for supporting men. We've got a question in the chat, but before we get there, I just wanted to ask a quick question just around the relationships. And you mentioned around people seeking support and things like that. But I was wondering if you have any guidance, particularly with the construction industry. It can be quite hard to approach the topic. Is there any guidance that you have or suggestions around if someone in our lives or our world, we may be worried about them, about how we can approach it in a way that won't get us to be told to get lost or a kind of thing?
Sure. So I guess that's in the way in which, you approach the conversation. Certainly giving someone time or space to, talk about what's going on. And it's a matter of being really curious, being really interested in what's going on for someone. So I know that there's a tendency to go, oh, hi, how you going? Yeah, right, I'm good. How are you? Yeah, all good. But to then actually sit down and ask, really, how are you going? Talk about what you're noticing with someone. So you might say, look, I've noticed that you've looked a bit down recently, or, hey, I've heard that, you've recently broken up with your partner, and I'm just wondering how you're going with that. Because I think when people tend to come across with curiosity and interest in a really meaningful way, then that gives people the opportunity to start having a conversation. And, I think, kind of pushing past that, oh, yeah, I'm all right, and be like, well, no, actually, I am really curious about how you're going.
Thanks. I'm going to come to Tao's question. I've just had another question in the chat that relates to what you're already talking about from Jason Peoples come in. The question that comes up in our discussions about men's well-being, do you have any further ideas around encouraging more curiosity around their own well-being?
Okay, so encouraging ideas around whether it's a conversation, is that the question?
Jason, if you want to come off mute and clarify a little bit more.
Yeah, so I guess it's just about kind of in our community, we go out and encourage, the conversations like you were just talking about. And part of what we do also is trying to, I guess, increase guys' curiosity about their own well-being, because a lot of people, don't really think about it in our mining heavy industry up here. They might spend their lives maintaining machinery, but if you ask, what they're doing to maintain themselves or their relationships, they don't really have an answer. So just ideas around, I guess, building that curiosity.
Yeah, and that's a really good question because how then if men are particularly just focused on work, I find that sometimes men don't even have the language to then even talk about what's going on in their relationship or how they're feeling psychologically. So whether that's an opportunity for you then to broach the subject by talking about your own stuff. So I often say to men, be the change that you want to see in the world. If you want to encourage men to open up and be vulnerable about their stuff, maybe you have to be the model that shows them how to do it. So, whether it's you talking about your own relationships or your own ups and downs of life, or finding, what is your own way to maintain your mental and social health and talk about that. Is there an opportunity, particularly if you are like FIFO or if you are working on a work site, is there an opportunity to organise, some sort of activity that you guys can do together, like even if it's just kicking a ball around at lunch break or something like that. So, often being the first one to open up and be vulnerable is a way to get other men to do it too.
Really, really good advice and good call out. We've got another question in the chat from Tao. Do you have any specific studies focusing on men from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds? He goes on to say in there a little bit more around, it appears that these individuals are often more isolated and overlooked, and it is crucial that we develop effective strategies to address their mental health issues while also accommodating their cultural needs and language barriers. Really, really good question.
Yeah, it is a really good question. And certainly there's a lot of organisations, out there or community-based programs that can support people from non-English speaking backgrounds or people from different cultural backgrounds. So it really is looking about what services are available. So I know here in Western Sydney, we actually have so many services out there, but some of them are not very well known. And that can be tricky, particularly if, English is a second language. And so it's a matter of, how do you find those supports? And certainly connecting with community can be helpful as well. So finding, a community where, you might have that cultural support as well.
Great, thank you. And Tao, if that didn't answer your question properly, feel free to email admin at Australian Mental Health Forum or amhf.org.au. I know that Glenn has spoken in the past around services that are available in Australia for the cold community with men, so I'm sure he can provide some more links. One more question in the chat. Why do you think the government doesn't fund more drug and alcohol rehabs in Australia?
Well, that's a tricky one, and I guess you'll have to ask the government that. Look, it's I mean, it's really difficult, and certainly, there's a lot of services out there that needs funding. So whether it's rehabs, support for people's substance use, domestic and family violence organisations, homelessness. I think there needs to be more funding for all of it, because, all of those issues can be interrelated as well. I know that doesn't really answer your question.
Yeah. Look, final question for you, Jessica. If people want to get connected with you or find out more about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So we have a website that people can access. So we are foundationhouse.net.au, and we also have FoundoBlue information that you can access for that. Our contact numbers are on there as well.
Amazing. Thank you. And look, as we wrap up today, we're just going to put a little link in the chat to a survey, and we invite people to click on the link and complete the survey and provide some feedback on today. But look, as we wrap up, I'd really like to thank Jessica for the very insightful presentation and really approaching a topic that quite often, whether or not it's ourselves or it's someone in our circle, it's something that does come up a lot in Australia, and something that I think we do need more and more research and more support systems in place to really support people through that. So Jessica, I really want to thank you for taking the time out and joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I'd also, you're most welcome. Thanks for being here. I'd also like to thank Robin and Kim from Australian Men's Health Forum for supporting the session today as well. And being here to help this happen. I'd also like to thank all of you for taking the time out and joining us today and being part of this week's series of events. I'd also just like to give another shout out and just to give a reminder that all the sessions, the 5 sessions that have been run this week, they're available through the Australian Men's Health Forum website, and they're stored on YouTube channel. And that is, so on Monday we heard from Duncan Armstrong, who spoke about why exercise is the best medicine for men's health. On Tuesday, we heard from JB, or Jonathan Bedlow, around how to help a mate who's doing it tough. On Wednesday, we heard from Dr. Alex Sweetman around everything you need to know about sleep and your health. I really need to go back and watch that one myself. Sleep is always something I need to cover a bit better off. And yesterday, we heard from the man himself, Glenn Poole, around 7 men's health checks to get before you die. So again, they're all available online. And I'd also like to thank Australian Men's Health Forum for hosting these events and for everyone involved in making this Men's Health Week a success. And thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a good rest of your Friday, wherever you're coming from in Australia, and have a great weekend.